your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
This is Cop Talk, talking crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Ed Mamet and Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cop Talk. Here are my co-hosts, Captain Ed Mamet. Our guest for this segment of Cop Talk is a man I'm proud to say I've been friends with for a quarter of a century. Steven Van Zandt is a moderate Renaissance man. Stevie, as we know, achieved many greatnesses besides being a musician, an actor, a broadcaster, as well as an activist. All these topics will be a focus of our conversations today with Steven Van Zandt, especially his work, and some of you folks, and many of you folks may not even know, his support for law enforcement. Stevie, welcome to Cop Talk.
How you doing, Detective?
Great to see you again, Stevie. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the show, what set you in motion as a kid growing up in New Jersey? I mean, what started you on your way to conquering the world?
Well, I think being in New Jersey was part of it. You know, when you're growing up in New Jersey, you can't wait to get out. Now, of course, since then I've learned to love where I come from. But you know, I think any kid, no matter where you're from, you know, you're trying to reach a little higher. You know, you're trying to get to the big time. You know, get to where you're going to be. Get to where you're going to end up. You know, for us being just an hour, you know, an hour or whatever, 75, you know, hour and a half away from New York City. New York City was the big mountain to climb. You know, that was the big challenge, and you know, that's why the Jersey people usually do well, because we try harder. You know what I mean? We're the underdogs. You know, we're not Philly and we're not New York. You know, we're the also ran. You know, we're always the underdog, and I think that makes us work harder. You know.
Let me chime in on that for a minute. I want to introduce myself. I'm retired Captain Edward Mamet, 40-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. When I was a young single guy dating, I always found that the Jersey girls were the best of all. They were like, you know, to me, they were like out-of-town girls, even though they were just across the river. So I used to reach out for these Jersey girls, and one of my greatest girlfriends was from Jersey. So I just want you to know I had this great appreciation for Jersey women.
Yeah, me too. In fact, I married one.
Yeah, guys, I had a Jersey Shore house for many years, and before I met my wife Heidi. So yeah, God bless the females in Jersey. Stevie, is it safe to say you're probably a rebellious kid? Any memories, good, bad, or indifferent, otherwise, in regards to you growing up with the cops, interacting with the cops in Jersey as a kid?
Well. Yeah, I had. We had a couple of incidents. We were in a suburb that was basically crime-free, and so being one of the very few hippies, I kind of stood out. You know, so we had two incidents, neither of which was very pleasant. First of all, I was picked up just for hitchhiking. And because I had long hair, I was the only really guy in the whole town who had long hair at the time. You know, I'm still a teenager. And in the 60s, you know, long hair was a very scary thing to the older generation. And so they they planted marijuana in my cigarettes to bust me for marijuana. And I hadn't started smoking marijuana yet, you know. And luckily they planted the wrong brand of cigarettes on me. So I was, I spent one day in jail, and then it turned out that they were not going to be able to press charges because it was an obvious plant, you know. So that was my first encounter with the police, and then we did a gig. And we had a local law enforcement guy who was a real gung-ho kind of guy, and they got all this SWAT, equipment, the shields and the helmets and the whole thing. And I'm telling you, we're in a town where there's no crime, none. Okay. And so we're playing this gig at this Clearwater pool, you know, and the pool was kind of recessed. It was like inside of a hill, you know, and the pool area was down below, and we're playing there, and it was just a nice peaceful gathering, you know, a couple thousand kids. And I look up, and it looked like, you know, the Indians, you know, in a Western movie, you know, the entire scene on top of the hill with these cops in SWAT gear. And they come rushing down, and then they beat everybody up. And it was a big local incident. So that was my two encounters with police in a suburb where there really was no crime and no real, you know, very, very different than an urban environment. And you know, we had police that had nothing better to do, to tell you the truth, you know, so they're picking on the hippies, you know, and of course I was one of the few hippies in town. So that was the beginning of my long and fruitful relationship with law enforcement. I started off a little bit of a bumpy road, but you know, we came to an understanding with each other, you know.
Yeah, that's good. That's not too bad. Now, when did you move to New York?
Pretty early on, you know. I moved up here. We started making the Darkness on the Edge of Town record, so it would have been 77, 78. So I've been up here 45 years, you know. I've been a long time. And, you know, moved downtown, I don't know, had a couple different places downtown starting 15 years ago.
I know you lived in Midtown, because that's how we met.
That's right. We first met in Midtown. You know, my wife was a ballet dancer and loved ballet, so we lived right near the Met. You know, right near the Metropolitan Opera House there, so that she could walk to the ballet. You know, while I was on the road, and that's when we first met. And then I moved downtown after that.
Now, Steve, how did you get involved with law enforcement charitable events, raising funds, et cetera?
Well, you came to me and said, you know, you wanted to honor me for whatever, you know, various things I was doing. And you know, we got into a conversation about it. And you started telling me about the two charities that you were supporting, you know, Arms Wide Open, which is for handicapped kids, you know, kids with special needs, I guess we say now, and the Widows and Children Fund. You know, that the police, the two police charities, and you know, I just was, you know, I got to a conversation. I said, you know, well, how much you expect to raise, you know, because, you know, you do it every year. And I forget, you said like whatever you said, you know, I don't know, $8,000, $10,000, you know, $12,000.
It was what it is, you know. It is what, you know. It's exactly. We were very happy with that until you came along and really burst it.
I said, well, come on, Kev, you know, we can do better than that. We decided to go forward with that, you know, together, and then we did a little bit better than that. So you know, I was just happy to give something back to law enforcement. You know, law enforcement gets nothing but bad press, and you know, not a lot of love from show business people. You know, not the show business people that matter anyway. Let's put it that way. You know, so I thought, you know, let's give something back to law enforcement. Let's show some gratitude and show law enforcement that even liberal independent hippies like me, you know, now I happen to be a law and order independent liberal, but still, I am a liberal independent, and even liberal independents like me want to show great gratitude to law enforcement. So I was happy to get involved, and we've been doing it now 7, 8 years, right?
Yes. 2015 is when you started the Little Stevens Policeman's Ball, and I believe up to date it's about 1.8 million in the past 7 years, which is a lot of money raised. You know.
Yeah, we did improve on that. We did improve on that $8,000. You know, it was good.
Yeah, we did slowly but surely. Yeah, no, we appreciate that. Believe me, you've helped so many families and friends in the law enforcement community, not only in New York City but beyond. Thank you for that. So let's just talk a little bit. You have a Rock and Roll Forever Foundation, which with the teacher rock teachers. You know, can you tell us a little bit about that foundation as well?
Yeah. It's actually Rock and Soul now. It got changed a few years ago. The Rock and Soul Foundation, which the main thing is the teachrock.org music history curriculum. We started. We started working on it. I don't know what, 15 years ago, and we just went public with it in these last few years. But basically, it's a music history curriculum taught in schools. We give it to teachers for free, and we have over 50,000 teachers teaching it now. We wanted to do several things. We wanted to keep the arts in the DNA of the public education system, because they took it all out with the No Child Left Behind legislation. And removing the arts from the education system is a huge mistake. Art is not just a luxury. It shouldn't be treated as a luxury. It's an essential part of the quality of life. It's a wonderful way to teach kids and get their attention and keep their attention, especially this generation. This generation, man, they're a lot smarter than us, Kev. They're smarter than us. They're faster than us. And you got to have a reason for them to be there. You got to have a reason, show them a reason not to look on their device and get an answer in 15 seconds. So we found that music is a great common ground, and we intend to improve the very nature of education with our curriculum, as well as hopefully once we get a little bit more of it out there, actually start affecting the graduation rate, because the dropout rate, Kev, as you know, is just intolerable. It's a scandal. I mean, it's close to 50% in the poor neighborhoods, and as you know better than anybody, you and Ed, 50% of those kids dropping out end up in the system, in the justice system. So that's a very, very high number. And a number that a civilized society should not be toterating. So if the kid graduates from high school, at least he's got a shot. It gives him a better shot.
Yeah. It sounds like the decline, equivalent to the decline in law enforcement, with cops, girls, and guys leaving the police department. Joining the police department and then just quitting because not dealing with the way everything is today with law enforcement, which we'll get to in a few minutes with Captain Ed. But no, it's a great organization, foundation you have with the teachers, as well as Little Steven's Policeman's Ball. I mean, you do great things and you help a lot of people, and a lot of people may not know that about you. They just know Stevie the rock star, which is a great title as well. Who's you going on tour with someone?
Yeah, depending on when this airs, I may already be on tour.
Gotcha.
So, we're going out with E Street Band, first time in 6 years. So it's, it's going to be brand new again.
Yeah, no, that's great.
We're gonna go out for at least a year, maybe two.
Just make sure you're back next December for our event at the Mandarin.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll go take a day off. Take a day off for that.
Exactly. Leave a slot for that show. How's ticket sales going? I'm sure things are going great. Correct?
Yeah, it's sold out. Yeah, the whole tour is sold out. It's nice. It's nice after 6 years. You never know. So it's nice. It's nice. We're gonna have it's gonna be a terrific tour. Really, maybe our biggest tour ever.
Great.
Yeah, Steve, I was listening to your background, which is fascinating, because there's been a sea change in the way law enforcement deals with drugs. When I was a young detective, I was in the Narcotics Bureau, the old Narcotics Bureau. I did 5 years of undercover work, and I did 7 years of what we would call out of the undercover work. And one of the big things we were enforcing were the marijuana laws. And I can't tell you how many people I arrested for possession of joints, the seeds, whatever. And now today, people are walking around the streets smoking. So it's kind of like I'm looking at myself and I'm saying, I put all these people in jail years ago, and now they're out. Now it's legal. And so listening to you was really quite interesting. So I just want to make that point about your background. It's fascinating how you went from a hippie liberal into a supporter of law enforcement. Probably back when I knew you, or back when I was working, I probably would have arrested you also.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, the thing with me is I'm still a hippie liberal. See, I didn't change. I just, I think law enforcement was the one who, they adapted to me, I think. You know what I'm saying? But it's a shame. It's a shame all those years of wasted law enforcement on the drug thing. I mean, even now, it should be made legal, and law enforcement has much more important things to do, as nobody knows better than you. And, starting in our neighborhood right now, we just need a whole holistic approach to a change in the entire system. And right now in New York, we're not getting a lot of help, from the governor and from the DA. And we're all hoping for this new mayor, is going to be better than the last mayor when it comes to this stuff. But it's tough. It's tough because the whole system is completely antiquated. Beginning with the prison system, there should be an entirely new prison system. The prison system we have just doesn't work in any way. And beginning there, and then beginning with the sentencing. And now this no bail thing, people are being arrested and they're out on the street the next day. All of that is just a real serious problem. There's no rehabilitation going on in prison. It's a joke, and they're all overcrowded, and it begins there. It begins in the courts. It begins with the sentencing, and the police have had their hands tied behind their backs for years. Trying to keep up with the public. What the public needs. And I'm talking about white and black and everybody. Everybody feels the same way, very much in need of more law enforcement. And, and it's been a whole misunderstanding about the whole, defund the police. I mean, police need more funding, not less. Me and Kevin talk about this all the time, beginning with right at the academy level, when police are first being brought into the system, their time on the range is limited, the amount of bullets they can use is limited, on the range. There should be martial arts training for the police for a year or two before they even touch a gun. I mean, when I grew up, cops were scary and cops were tough. They didn't need a gun just to scare me when I was a kid. And I just think the whole system needs changes. I mean, we need the kind of reform we need for police is more training, more funding, not less. And I think that would straighten out a lot of things because there's no reason to be shooting people when they're unarmed. We all know that. I think a year or two of martial arts training would be very good for police to, give them confidence, and then an unlimited amount of time on the range. People always say, "Well, why didn't they shoot him in the leg? Why didn't they shoot him in the arm? Why they got to shoot him why do they have to shoot him in the head? Why do they have to shoot him in Well, because they, their time is limited on the range. They're not given enough time to become really good marksmen or good. So these kind of things have to be understood, and police have a very tough job. Their lives are at risk every single day, and they should be given more training, more weapons training, more martial arts training, so they can make sure that they can defend themselves and give them more confidence. And then they wouldn't be so quick to necessarily shoot first. In some cases. So, but of course, those are the cases that get publicized, and it's one out of 100,000. I mean, it's not even 1%. But unfortunately, that's what gets publicized, and people don't understand that police have their hands tied behind their backs because of budgets from the moment they enter the academy. So I mean, these things have to change. The prison system has to change. The sentencing has to change. People need longer sentences, and they need sentences that involve rehabilitation. No prisoner should ever see another prisoner in jail. This concept of isolation being somehow against humanity, is ridiculous. No prisoner should ever see another prisoner. I have a whole prison designed I started writing a political book addressing a lot of this stuff. And in my book, I describe an entirely new prison system where a prisoner never sees another prisoner. They have their own outside area as part of their cell, and they have computers, that they have to deal with, and the ability to learn and educate themselves. And it's a whole system that has to do with rehabilitation and has to do with them never seeing another prisoner. There's a reason why when criminals call jail, they get called prison college. There's a reason for that.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. And that means thousands of can't-miss deals just in time for summer.
The denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses.
I always find something amazing.
Plus, buy it online and pick it up in-store the same day for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Steve, you've opened up a Pandora's box of issues, but let me point out to you the nature of policing. The United States is unique in the way it polices. I used to teach, criminal justice at the college level. In fact, I was teaching in New Jersey, down at You probably remember Brookdale Community College.
Yeah, that's right. That's my neighborhood where I grew up.
Yeah, okay. So I used to teach there while I was still in the New York City Police Department. I was teaching down there on my off-duty time, criminal justice. And I have to tell you that the nature of police work in the United States is very different from the rest of the world. Most countries have what they call a national police force. In other words, there's one police force for the entire nation, and it's broken up into sub-districts. The United States, each state has its own set of police departments. In fact, in New Jersey, which is not that large of a state, has more police departments in the state than any other state in the United States, these little departments. And so one of the problems that we have is uniformity. For example, the New York City Police Department trains its people very well. That doesn't mean that the police in some smaller area get the same kind of training. There's a lot of problems with coordination. Now, there are national standards. Now, you hit upon the range. Okay, the national standard for firearms training is 4 times per year. Now, in a small department like where you grew up, you can do that. You can train 4 times a year because you're not dealing with large numbers. But New York City, you're dealing with thousands of police officers. So they can only do it about twice a year because otherwise it would be extremely expensive. You know, the ammunition costs a lot of money. And also to train 25, 30,000 police officers 4 times a year is like turning around an aircraft carrier. It's a big deal. So that's one of the problems. New York recognizes the fact that you should be on the range more than twice a year, but it's not logistically possible. That's one thing. Now, as far as the shooting in the arm or the leg, that's kind of TV and movie land fantasy. In fact, Biden, to his ignorance, made that dopey comment, which has enraged police around the country. I don't know if you're aware of it, but some of the larger police organizations supported him, and they have now withdrawn their support. They said that if he runs, they're not going to support him because of the comments he made about police should be using less force, aim for the legs and aim for the arms. That's an impossibility. Police are trained to shoot at the largest part of the body, which is called center mass. Okay, and interestingly enough, most police shootings, cops actually miss. Statistically, the research has been done of New York City Police Department shootings, and more than likely, they miss the target, even if they're firing center mass. So this whole idea about cops shooting in the legs and arm is nonsense. You shoot to stop the threat. If you wait too long, you get killed. And so you have to act quickly. Now, we haven't reached the point like in England where they don't carry guns. And the reason that is because England and the British Isles, they're law-abiding communities, although that's changing. But for centuries, the cops over there never carried guns, the bobbies, because the people respected the police. Here, we don't have respect for the police. So police get involved in situations and they're forced to use force because they're not respected and they're attacked. I mean, look what's going on in New York City just the other day. 2 cops in a radio car were shot at by a couple of, teeny boppers. So what are they supposed to do? They have to shoot
Exactly.
back. So
Exactly.
the problem,
Exactly.
and the problem is system-wide. You have to have coordination between the district attorneys, corrections, the courts, and the police. So the United States policing, as I say, is very different from the rest of the world. And that's because of the federal system that we have, of each state, each county, each little municipality having their own police agency.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you got to deal with the gun laws that are different in every state, right?
That's correct.
That's a whole nother problem. But this is why these kinds of things, they snowball all the way from TV shows all the way to the president. Shoot him in the arm, shoot him in the leg. When they don't, nobody ever explains, the complications of that and the fact that the police do not have the budgets to be able to do that, And to my mind, there is absolutely no option in that. That budget needs to be found, okay? And it's not like, oh, well, we can't do it because we don't have the budget. We should be very conscious of making sure the police have the budget they need to keep themselves safe and to keep our society safe. We don't think that way. We budget them the same way we budget whatever, the highway repair or something like that. And they're on the front lines, the police are on the front lines every day. They're just like the same way I talk about teachers. Teachers are on the front lines fighting the war against ignorance. That's why we spend so much time on education. Well, police are on the front lines every day. And here we are spending, $800 billion on defense? And we're not at war with anybody. Where's the war? The war is the one you're fighting. You and Kevin and the rest of the police. You're the ones who are in the war. And why some of that 800 billion needs to go to you.
Even with more budgeting, that's not going to stop training. Regardless, police are still going to be taught to shoot at center mass. That's how you eliminate misses. You aim to the largest part of the body, and that's the national standard. So the idea is to not shoot if you don't have to. Now, this thing about martial arts, we don't want our cops engaged in martial art because you get injured. One of the greatest injuries police suffer are orthopedic injuries, including myself. If you look at the line of duty injuries and the retirements that take place for line of duty injuries, they're usually orthopedic, backs, legs, arms, and a lot of that has to do with struggles with prisoners. The last thing you want to do is get engaged in close combat with one or more prisoners because that's when you get hurt. So that's why.
Right. But in case that happens, wouldn't it be better if you were better prepared for it?
Yes, and that's why
point.
Police now carry tasers and they carry OC spray.
Well,
those are called less lethal weapons. Okay, so there is a police are taught to there's an escalation of force doctrine where you start off at the lowest level, and the last resort is the firearm. Now, when I came in the department, which was many, many years ago, we didn't have OC spray. We didn't have tasers. All we had was a revolver with 6 shots and a nightstick. And we were very good with the nightsticks. I don't remember ever. I was involved in one shooting. In a 40-year career, I was involved in one shooting, okay, where I was attacked by six people. But other than that, we were pretty good at handling ourselves, with the nightstick is called a baton. You don't see that anymore. Now the cops walk around with this little thing that expandable, which is nonsense. That just the mere sight of a baton was scary to a lot of people. I'm sure when you saw cops with a baton, you said, "Hey, I don't want that over my neck or my head." So cops are taught to not fire right away. And so I say there are means of engaging in force without use of firearms to gain control. But we don't want to get into martial art combat if possible. If you have to, that's one thing. But you don't want to encourage cops to do that.
All I'm saying is it would be better, the more training police have in that area, in case they do get into that situation, the better they'll be able to protect themselves, and maybe there'll be less orthopedic injuries. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you can never have enough training, but the problem is you have now a problem with shortages. If you don't have enough cops to go on patrol, how are you going to do the training? You have to pull them off patrol to do the training. So, it's a mixed bag. When you have a fully staffed police agency, and you can maintain the basic police function of patrol, you can then pull people off patrol and train them. Right now, the New York City Police Department, for example, is undergoing a severe shortage of personnel. And Kevin can tell you that from his experience. Cops are working overtime. They're not getting days off. They're burning out. We had a suicide just the other day. And so there's no time for training at this point.
We got to pay them more.
Stevie, I have a question. Stevie, what is your opinion right now, as Captain Ed just said, personnel with NYPD and actually throughout the country is declining, okay, at a very fast rate. With that said, what is your recommendation? You have any thoughts on how to get young people more interested in careers in law enforcement? Polls show, like I said, declining every day. They're declining. I think
it begins with, we gotta pay them better. You gotta, they should be among the highest paid people in society. How many people are going to work every day with their lives in danger? They should be highly paid, just like firemen should be highly paid. You begin with that, and then I think integrating police into the communities, I think helps. And again, there's got to be a way for people who know the neighborhood, to have friends and family in the neighborhood. I think that helps, and like Ed was saying, finding a way to have more respect for the police because it's a highly paid job and highly trained job. You know what I mean? The pay should be higher, the training should be more broad, including, community work within the community, perhaps, interrelated, somehow, and I think the more local the police are and integrated into the neighborhood, the better they are, the better off everybody is. And that's, so we, we need a holistic approach to all of this to help the situation out. There's not any one thing. We need higher budgets for the police, more training, more money for them, more time, more respect, more neighborhood, involvement, better prison system, better sentencing, all of that, better gun laws. I mean, the Second Amendment is the worst thing that ever happened to us. And the incredible misinterpretation of the Second Amendment is embarrassing, frankly. I mean, the NRA had an entirely different definition of it 20 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's like everybody gets to be their own militia. That's bullshit. And I mean, that's just, the first thing that needs to go in this country is that Second Amendment. That needs to be removed. I mean, we should be treating guns the same way we treat car licenses, right? You need a license to have a car. You should have a license to get a gun. You should be able to know how to use it, how to protect it, and be limited to, how many you can have. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous.
What's your thoughts, Captain?
Well, if you want to get young people interested in police, you first have to show that they're going to be supported. When I came on, I viewed it as a calling. Most of the people that I came in the department with, they weren't looking to make money because the salaries weren't that great. We looked at it as a calling. We were very proud, and we had the support of the community. If you don't have the support of the community and you don't have people looking to the police with respect, you're not going to get these people to come in. Now, I have to say that New York City does a pretty good job of trying to recruit. We have the cadet program, we have the police training program. You have places, John Jay College, for example, people go and they get a law enforcement background, and that's how we attract them. But unless you have respect for the police, and they're not going to want the job. They're really not. As far as the salaries go, yes, you have to make the salaries competitive with private industry. And what's interesting about the New York City Police Department, it is now a minority majority. When I came in the department, my company, the police academy, we were 35 of us, and we had 2 or 3 black guys in my company of 35, and the company was 250 total. We were 4 companies, and in that group, there was maybe 10 black cops, and they were as good as I am because they passed the same test I did. They met all the qualifications I did. There was no lowering of the standards, and they did the same job I did. Today, the Hispanic and black numbers actually exceed the whites. So you have, even though they're called minorities, they are the majority of the police department. So the nature of policing is changing all over the country. In fact, if you look at what's going on, you'll see many police chiefs are not white or non-white or Hispanic. So in that sense, you were talking about slavery and the black ghettos and all. The black population is getting more and more involved in government, and they're taking over leadership roles. I mean, you'll just look here. We've had 2 black mayors in my time. So we're getting there. Now, how long it's going to take, who knows? But I think eventually there'll be integration, full integration, the way you're talking.
Yeah, it's just been ridiculously slow. But yeah, we're heading in the right direction, no doubt about it. But man, his progress is just too slow.
Have patience.
Stevie, how do you think we could bridge the gap between the liberals and the progressives and the law enforcement community? How can we bridge that gap?
I don't think it's as big a gap as is publicized, first of all. Yeah, a lot of the extreme left, just like the extreme right, they got the biggest mouths, okay, but they're not necessarily the majority in any kind of way. You talk to anybody, and any black person in a black neighborhood, they don't see the police often enough, believe me. So I mean, I think everything we're talking about is gonna help. We're gonna have to be a little bit more careful, obviously, and I think a little more training is gonna help everybody, and a little more pay is gonna help everybody. I know Ed talking about pride. Pride is a little hard to come by these days, okay? A little bit harder than it used to be. And, a little extra money maybe is going to help that pride. That's all I'm saying. And I think we need to do that. And just to give the police the same respect. Because unfortunately, that's how people are measured these days. It's a different world. People are measured by the money they make, by the money they have. Money has become, unfortunately, the religion of America. And maybe it always was, but certainly never as much as it is now. So I think that money is a factor when it comes to recruiting. and again, the respect of the neighborhood and all of that we're talking about. But I think more training helps. And I think I know martial arts seems like some kind of unrealistic goal, but I think it has a symbolic meaning also. That police are going to go out of their way, to try and stop people who are unarmed. The unarmed thing is what gets exaggerated, but also gets publicized. When people are shot that are unarmed, and then maybe they're on angel dust or whatever whatever, they're attacking a police officer. I just think a police officer that can handle themselves in that situation is going to help the symbolic nature of it all, the publicity nature of it all. Shooting, like Ed said, only when you absolutely have to, which should never be when the person is unarmed. That's my own belief. Okay, police officers should be able to handle people who are not armed in a way that is, not gonna be blown up into something exaggerated. That's all. I think the gap is we need to just have the better understanding. The more people get together and talk to each other, and anything that enables that encourages that, I think is a good thing. And again, the slowly making these ghettos not ghettos. We're not an integrated nation. Okay, we've been trying to integrate this nation ever since Abraham Lincoln. Okay, and we have not done a very good job of it. We gotta figure that out, and that starts to involve the immigrant thing. It's a whole nother discussion we can have. I'm very conservative when it comes to immigration. There's 10 million, undocumented immigrants in our country, and 10 million out of the 10 million are working. All right, they're your gardeners and your waiters and there should be a path to citizenship for them. And yes, there should be an absolute border that's protected. We need to start addressing these things. We need immigrants in this country. They're believe me, the day immigrants stop working in our country, we come to a complete halt. So that's a whole nother thing. But they have to be integrated. And nobody talks about that. We need to integrate immigrants just like we need to integrate our Black population after, 400 years or whatever it's been. Come on, what are we doing? Well, we need to start making some moves here to help you out, all right? Because, you can't, police, all the pressure is on police to do these things that are unrealistic and impractical. And on top of that, your life's in danger and you're underpaid and you're undertrained. I mean, come on. It's not fair. It's not fair, and you should be getting more respect because of what you do, not less.
Stevie, the average, cop today coming on the job in the police academy, what they start with the first year or two, really they have to live at home because they can't afford an apartment. Forget about it. And they say, oh, you'd like the cops to live in the city of New York. Well, show me an apartment that you can get for $500 a month and I'll move there. No, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So full circle, and also, cops throughout the nation, do this job for a lot less. A lot of people wouldn't do this for $1 million. No, they don't get the respect. And that's why today, as the captain spoke about and you touched on, the decline in law enforcement personnel leaving. I mean, there's kids, back when I came on in 1985, guys maybe left NYPD to go to Nassau County because they paid more, Suffolk County because they paid more, fire department because they wanted to put out fires. There's a lot of kids just leaving to leave and just go work in the supermarket, not even, or maybe follow their career, whatever they got a degree in from college. It's just a different world today, and that's why we need to support the police throughout the country as well as the world moving forward, and we need to stop all the BS.
I'd like to comment again, Steve. You seem to have this great concern about martial arts. It's more complicated than you think. Theoretically, you're correct. But let me point this out to you. When I came in the department, which was many years ago, it was all male. Very few female. We had a separate title for the women. They were called police women, and they were limited. There was only 250, and they were assigned to dealing with children alike. So most of the cops were big, burly Irish guys, tough guys, World War II veterans, Korean War veterans. They could handle themselves. Okay, there was a height limit, and I was one of the smallest guys in the job. I had just made the height limit. Today, there is no height limit. You have a lot of women. Now, without sounding sexist, it's very hard for a small 5'2" women to get involved with a 6'3" ox in a struggle, someone who's crazed on speed and struggle with them. So that theory that you have sounds great, but the realization is it's very difficult.
Ed, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying that should be that should be the normal way that police are dealing with perpetrators. I'm saying if in fact you find yourself in that situation, which is going to happen inevitably, okay? I'm just saying, wouldn't it be better if you're prepared, or if a 5'2" woman is prepared? And I believe that should be the truth. That should be the case with women beyond the police department, okay? You want to end sexual assaults? There's only one way to do it, all right? That's train women in martial arts from kindergarten. All right, that's what I would be doing.
That's a good idea.
You know, it just gives you more confidence. It gives you more ability. It's more tools for your trade. That's all I'm saying. You know, why not? What harm's it going to do? You may never use it. You may never have an encounter with somebody where you got to wrestle them to the ground or whatever it is, you know. But in case you do, wouldn't it be better to be prepared for it? That's all I'm saying.
No, I agree with you. But let me point this out to you. What good is the training when you have like a city council that we have in New York? They've prohibited cops from doing, what they call chest compression, where you can't sit on someone's back to hold them down. You can wind up committing a crime if you do that. So the politicians are restraining the police, where even if you wanted to be engaged in martial arts, you have to be careful how you do it. You can wind up going to jail just for violating stupid law that these dopey politicians passed. So, you need political support for some of these things you want.
Absolutely you do. Absolutely you do. I'm saying there's a whole holistic approach. It's a big approach than any one thing. But, you got to be the proper training is the proper training. And this way you avoid, some guy dying, who's out there selling cigarettes on the street. You know what I mean? That's the thing that all of a sudden gets blown up forever. And it can be avoided if the training is right. And then, okay, this is a dangerous move. You can't do this. You can't do that. But there's a million other things you can do. And the better the training, the better for everybody. That's all I can say.
Stevie, I'll say it starts with compliance. Uniformed police officer approaches you and says, "Sir, ma'am, you're under arrest. Please put your hands behind your back." Okay,
I agree.
We'll figure it out in court. Once you start, I'm not going today. We're going to fight. That's a problem. So
I know. No. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
And one last note, and then I know you agree, but one last note on that as well is a cop has a split-second decision to make in most arrests, okay? So especially when a situation goes bad, it's a split-second decision. You have to make the hope that no one's getting hurt here, including yourself. You're going home to your family. And unfortunately, sometimes they go a different way. With that said, all these politicians have hours, days, weeks, and months to figure it out. What should that cop maybe done different? Guess what? He or she had a split-second decision. Hopefully, it's the right decision. Most of the time, it is the right decision. But when it's not, like I said, they have all the time in the world to figure it out when you have a split-second decision.
That's right, Kevin. And that goes to exactly what I'm saying. What's going to help that split-second decision? More training. That's what. Okay? We don't go on stage, okay, with a couple of, training 4 times a year. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? We go on stage with 10,000 hours of training behind us. 10,000 hours. We go on stage and you know what? We do a great show every single time. Why? Because of the training, rehearsal, okay? And the same thing applies here. Exactly what you're saying. You got to, and of course, it's far more serious, in your situation, and nobody dies, in rock and roll, except we lost a few people this week. You're in a life and death situation. And I'm saying to you, that means more training, not less, more for that split-second moment for your own protection. That's all I'm saying. Yes, it also is good for society, of course. And then society sees this. Hey, the guy was doing the right thing. What would you do in that situation? You would do the same thing. You got to make sure that that's the way that it gets publicized. And that's going to happen with more training. That's all I'm saying. You improve your odds. You improve your odds of coming out of going home to your family.
True, very true. Stevie, let's talk about crime in your neighborhood since you live in New York City.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
When we talk about the crime in your neighborhood?
The problem, again, right now the crimes are first of all, the homeless thing is out of control. And this is something no one has been addressing for 50 years. All right? I mean, you go watch politicians talk, it never even comes up. All right. It doesn't even, they didn't even want to discuss it. We got it bad, but if you've been to LA or San Francisco lately, you can't believe what's going on there. Yeah. It looks like Africa or India. I mean, miles of homeless people. All right. Again, I address this in my political book that I'll probably never finish and never come out. But I talk about we need to build transitional villages. Okay, we need to build transitional neighborhoods outside of the major cities where we can house the homeless and also immigrants, by the way, or refugees. All right, transitional housing, which is not getting ghettos, not garbage, but real housing with doctors and nurses and teachers and psychologists and everybody that we need in those situations to help people. But we need to address this. You build these, whatever they're going to be, 1,000 people neighborhoods outside of every major city, or we have, I don't know what the last number is, somewhere, I don't know what it is, 500,000, 600,000, a million homeless, but it needs to be, they need to be housed and taken care of in terms of mental help and physical help, and job training, whatever it is, in terms of, in English, in terms of immigrants and refugees. They all need to be put into what I call transitional housing. And I mean transitional, not permanent. They're gonna pass through there. They're gonna get well, whatever. If they're mentally ill, if they're too far gone, then it does become permanent. But if they're just physically down on their luck, or an immigrant learning English, let them pass through there and then get integrated into society. They must be integrated into society and not ghettoized in the middle of society. I worked with the homeless for many, many years, 40 years ago. And the thinking was, we need to integrate the homeless into our urban centers. All right, so this will help the homeless eventually integrate into society. This concept is completely wrong. It's wrong. It has failed, okay? And all it does is lower the quality of life for everybody. And I'm sorry, that ain't right. That ain't right, nobody feels more for the homeless than I do. And I'm telling you, I worked a lot of years on that issue. But this is the answer. The answer is to give them housing in a separate place so that people can have quality of life who are, have managed to not be homeless. We're going to lower the quality of life for everybody because there's some homeless, or, because of immigrants or because of refugees. That's not the way to think. Put them in a separate place and help them, just like the rehabilitation and prison system. Those prisoners need to be integrated back into society, not taught how to be better criminals, which is what's happening right now in prisons. All they're doing is being taught how to be better criminals. It's not working. Our society doesn't work, okay? And we got to stop avoiding the issues and start confronting these issues and say, okay, what's the answers here? We need some answers. And it just makes you guys' life much harder. And our quality of life, here we are. I mean, I was in the best neighborhood in New York. This was the best neighborhood in New York. It's not the worst, okay? Why? I mean, my wife's been accosted by homeless people 4 or 5 times now. Nothing serious, but they're putting their hands on her. That's not acceptable. And then we got a park, the park, we're close to one of the parks, and nothing but drug dealers in there. And I'm for drugs being legal, first of all. So, I got nothing against drugs being legal, but the drug dealers that are in the park, are not the friendliest, among our society. They're not nice guys, So, we got nothing but drug dealers and homeless right now because of the pandemic, because of the quarantine. And I've had some help from the police department, once in a while they'll send a car, and they'll park it in front of my house for a little while, which, believe me, works. It works. I mean, the neighborhood instantly becomes better, when you get a police car parked on in front of your house, believe me. But, they can't do that all the time. They got to, Ed was saying, they're very much understaffed now. And, we're looking to get out. I'm not may not tolerate this much longer if things don't improve. I'm going to get out of here and go somewhere where it's safe. And that's a shame. If you start losing a tax base like my tax base, you're really going to have problems.
Very true.
Steve, you're preaching to the choir because you and I are just about neighbors. We're basically in the same neighborhood, and I see the same things you do. In fact, I want to tell you this. A few months ago, I parked my car right in front of my building, which is not far from where you live. And I come down in the morning and I start the engine. And it sounded like an explosion. During the night, the catalytic converter of my 22-year-old car was cut out. And it cost $900 to replace that converter. Thank goodness I had insurance. The insurance company allowed me $700. But that's how bad things are. Before that, somebody met me here for dinner. She parked her car right near my building. I get a call from the doorman who saw on the surveillance camera that a guy walks by with a bag. He looks the car over, takes a big rock, throws it through the window of her car, smashes it, and steals the contents. I mean, she was foolish enough to leave her personal belongings in the back seat. But this is in broad daylight. I mean, this is what's going on in an area that at one time was considered very, upscale, and it's crazy. And then you have the drug dealers all over the place, and the homeless accosting you, sleeping outside your door, right?
Yeah.
Urinating and defecating. If you, in my building, there is a bank, and they sneak into where the machine is, and they sleep in there, and they use it as a toilet. So it affects everybody.
It's really not acceptable by a civilized society, and turning our heads away from it is not solving anything. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we need to address it. And I'm telling you, that's the answer. There should be nobody homeless in the cities. They should be housed and taken care of in a separate area.
It's not just the homeless. We're talking about the drug dealers. Look, it's a question of law enforcement. We have a district attorney. On day one, you saw that manifesto he put out. We're not going to charge for this, that, and the other thing. He just about eliminated anything, any criminal punishment. We need strong law enforcement. We need district attorneys who are going to prosecute these people, and we need the judges to sentence them. We got to get them off the street if they're criminals. As far as the homeless, being homeless is not a crime, but drug dealing is. Boosting is. Stealing catalytic converters is a crime. Smashing the car window. These are the people that have to be arrested and prosecuted. And until we get strong prosecution, we're going to have this problem. So,
absolutely.
And those people that voted for a guy like Bragg, in my opinion, deserve what they're getting. If you're living in Manhattan and you're complaining about crime and you voted Democratic for Bragg, then shame on you. You're stuck with it. Now, I know you're quite a liberal, but I hope next time you vote, you're not going to vote for a guy like Bragg if you're still in the city.
No. I'm telling you, I am a law and order liberal, okay? I'm a law and order liberal. That's not a contradiction in terms, all right?
That's very true. That's very true. You are, Stevie. That's very true.
And even if they arrested the guy who stole the catalytic converter, if they arrested him, he's back on the street the next day. This cannot continue like this. Believe me, it's a problem that goes all the way again to the prisons. The prisons have to be, there's no room in the prisons either, so that's got to be expanded, and it's got to be redefined and rebuilt and reimagined. The entire prison system needs to be bigger and more thinking in terms of how is it going to affect the society, not just housing people and getting them out of sight, so that the recidivism is out of control, because they're coming out of jail, they got no work, they got no craft, they got no rehabilitation, and what are they going to do? They go back to now they're better criminals because they've been hanging out with better criminals in prison. So it's all connected.
Stevie, your thoughts on policing today?
Well, we've been talking about it. Everything I've said. I think the pay needs to be increased. The training needs to be increased. As much as we can integrate it into the neighborhoods, I would try and prioritize a little bit more. I think a lot of traffic stops have become problematic. We got to be a little bit maybe adjusting to, making sure that the police are, their time is being used most wisely, getting help from community organizers. They need to work with community organizers and integrate into the neighborhoods better. But it starts off with the budget. The budget needs to be appropriate for the job, and by the way, it's the same thing with teachers. You got teachers and cops starting their careers. They're 27,000 a year, 30,000. I mean, what are you gonna do with that? You can't live on it. That's ridiculous. The way we have, nobody's adjusting to the fact that money has no value anymore. It's a whole other discussion we should have someday. But it's not just even employment anymore. It's the value of the dollar. Where's it going? How far can it go? And it's going less and less. And that's why the whole world is pissed off, by the way. Okay, not just here. That's why fascism is on the rise everywhere. I did 2 world tours right before the pandemic. It's everywhere. You're seeing fascism rising, authoritarianism rising, and religious extremism rising everywhere. Why? Because everybody is disappointed with their lives. Okay, everybody. All right, they're working twice as hard for half the return that they used to get. Okay, which pisses everybody off. So along come these demagogues, these wise guys, con men, and say, you're working twice as hard and you're getting nothing for it. But guess what? It's not your fault. It's the black guy's fault. It's the immigrants' fault, and people buy that. They don't want to be, they don't want to take any responsibility for themselves or look at the bigger picture. They want to blame somebody. And that's what's going on, and that's why everybody is disappointed with their lives right now because they can't get ahead. So we have to start facing these problems and finding some solutions. And part of it is the value of the dollar. I mean, right now we got these assholes in the House who, want to tax everybody 30% more for every single thing you buy, 30% more, and eliminate Social Security, which we've all paid into already, and Medicare. That's what the Republican solution is right now. This is what we got to deal with, and we have to start looking at this like saying, why are people disappointed with their lives? Let's figure this out. Society does not work anymore. We are a dysfunctional society that's holding on by threads, and you guys are on the front line trying to keep this thing together with, bubble gum and Band-Aids. We got to start facing this. We really do. I mean, we're losing this wonderful country that we've built.
Speaking about shortages and speaking about, there's a shortage in nursing as well. They're also first responders on the front line as well. There's a huge shortage in this country, especially New York City, with nursing as well. And nurses get paid pretty well, but they get burnt out. They're overwhelmed, overworked, and they get burnt out just like the cops are and the teachers are.
True, and then we got Elon Musk, going to Mars because he got nothing better to do with his billions of dollars. So we need some adjustments here,
Yeah, my thoughts on policing today is until the general public shows respect for the police like they did years ago, we're going to have a major problem. And most of this stuff comes around because of the George Floyd incident. And what's most interesting, they burned down Minneapolis, but now they're trying to get cops back and paying them bonuses. So it's crazy. But that case, the George Floyd case, has severely impacted policing in the United States. People don't want to come in anymore. They don't see it as a calling. Now they see it as just a job. And if they're not happy, they leave. In my time, it was a calling. You came in, you stayed with it. Even though you weren't getting paid what you got in private industry, you loved the job. I enjoyed going to work. I used to work 4 to 12s. I used to love it. I couldn't wait. When I was single at the time, my parents would say, "What are you running out to get killed twice?" I love it. And then when I got married, it was the same thing. Today, it's different. I'm sure Kevin, who is, much more up on this than I am, could tell you the same thing. It's no longer a calling. It's just a job, 9 to 5, whatever the hours are. And if something better comes along, I'm leaving. Correct, Kevin?
That is correct. That is correct. And again, not even going to other police departments, just going somewhere else, wherever the job may be. It's about money.
Yeah. So
Pay a bill.
young people, they don't see the job the way I saw it as a kid. And don't forget, I first generation, my parents were depression. I was from out of the depression. Well, I wasn't during the depression, but I grew up right after it. And the attraction for police work was great. The attraction for many civil service positions were great, but that's not the case anymore. So unless we take a strong stand on policing and support the police nationwide, we're going to have a continual problem.
I agree.
It's very, very different world. It's a very different world, and we need to adjust. We need to adjust to it.
Stevie, I want to thank you for being a guest on our show, Cop Talk. You've been a great guest. You're such an interesting conversation. So thank you so much, and God bless you and your family, and good luck to you on your tour. I think you guys went up in Tampa. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. And I thank you. It's been my pleasure. And I thank you both for your service. I thank you on behalf of the entire rock and roll world.
Thank you, Steven.
Thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you for everything you do every day for law enforcement throughout the country. Thank you so much for being a guest.